David must be in his truck.
I am. Best place to do it's in my truck. There's no internet down here in this part of the country worth a dime.
You have to go to the top of the hill.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
How's everybody?
Hey, Dewan, how you doing, sir?
All right, Mark.
Dewan, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Charlie. Thank you. It's a nice looking tree you got in the background.
Well,
Charlie. Hey, Charlie Perkins.
We both, I guess
Good.
the two attorneys for the applicant tonight, I guess, have raised their hand. Do we want
They'll
to hear
just
from them
have
before
to.
we
They'll
open
just
them,
have to
or
wait their turn. I saw
we
that
just
as
wait?
well, Matt.
I might just have a
Just
question.
figured I would check with you all first.
I mean, we'll get to them pretty quick. I mean, we'll run through.
Those guys live with their hands in the air.
Professionally speaking, from one attorney to the other, right?
That's
Chuck?
right. You better believe it. We're taught that way.
All right. I've got 6 o'clock, so let's get started here. Special meeting, Georgetown County Planning Commission agenda for December 10th of 2020. Welcome, everybody. I think we've got just about everybody, if I'm not mistaken, with the exception of. So let's just
All
jump
right.
into there.
Hello.
Oh, Miss Mary Singer, I'm sorry.
No, I just now popped in.
So we'll start right away. Commission business, 1A, approval of November invoices. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Mizell,
Second.
second by, I think that was Charlie Mifflin. All in
Yes.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approval of November 12th, 2020 minutes. So minutes from last month. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read those. I'll need a motion to approve those.
So moved. Stephen,
Motion by Mr. Smith
second.
and a second by Mr. Stone. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Next on the agenda, approval of the December agenda. I don't think there's been any changes. So I just need a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Smith. I need a
We
second.
need to reflect the cell phone tower change.
Yes, thank you. What is the official, are we postponing the cell tower ordinance public? Is that what it is? Till next
Yes.
month?
Yes, we
We're
need to
continuing
postpone.
it. I think Charlie always likes the word continuing.
Always like that word.
Yeah,
All right,
thank you.
Per our attorney, Mr. Perkins, we will continue.
Yeah, what you would do, Mr. Chairman, is call, open the hearing and then say, for whatever reason, and then say, because of that, we're continuing it to next month. And that way we don't have to do new notices or anything.
All right, you want to do that now or you want to wait till we get down that part of the agenda?
Since it's not going to happen and people may be tuned in for that, I would suggest you pull that
All
up
right,
and do
so
it now.
just for the record, if anybody's here for the small cell tower ordinance, we are going to open that right now for public hearing. Then we're also, I need a motion then to continue it to next month.
I'll make that motion.
A motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
a second by Mr. Vest. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so what we'll do now is close the public hearing.
Yes, sir. If you would state the reason why we're continues to next month, just so they can understand and not be calling and all.
Matthew, you want to give the formal,
I'll do that.
or Joe, please, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. We need to postpone that because it's an amendment of a previous ordinance that was recommended for approval, and we need to do it through a formal public hearing process. And we didn't get the notice in the paper in time. They cut down to twice a week, the news graphic, and the deadline for the advertisement was pushed back because of Thanksgiving. So we missed getting it in time to do an official public hearing. So we're going to re-advertise and do that in January.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. And had we closed the public hearing? I think.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
so
you did.
set there. Okay, back to the commission business. D, items for postponement or withdrawal.
No others.
No others, okay. Consent agenda, nothing's consent eligible, so we'll continue to move on. And then it looks like under item 2, old business, we've got PDP 2020-41, the Villages of Fall Creek amended master plan, request to amend the master plan remaining lots in phase 2 located east side of Falls Creek development. Joe, before you start, I know to Matt's point, both the attorneys had their hands raised. If you don't mind, let's get Attorney Rowden and Attorney Billings, I think both had their hands up. If you want to touch base with them, make sure that they're still okay and want you to cover this application briefly.
Okay. Matt, can you pull them forward?
Yeah, they should be able to talk.
Okay. Do
Okay.
you have, yeah. Do you have any questions, Mr. Billings?
I got disconnected there for a second when you all were putting me in the meeting and I couldn't hear anything for about.
You didn't miss anything, Attorney Billings. We were just talking, I think you had your hand raised and so did Mr. Rodden. So we wanted to make sure before Joe does a brief overview of the Villages of Falls Creek. Did you have a brief question or comment before we start?
Well, I have a presentation as typical, but I don't think the commission actually needs to take any formal action on either of the items from the staff report, but I was going to reserve those comments for letting staff go ahead first. I didn't know if Joe wanted to address that legal issue, but that's staff's is usually to go first. So is all.
I've thought about this a little bit, Mr. Billings. What I want to do tonight, and I know we have a few attendees, it looks like, of the general public. I think this meeting may or may not go. So what I wanted Joe Kane to do is briefly go over the application. And then I'm going to let the attorneys, Mr. Billings, Mr. Rodden, and Mr. Perkins probably have the floor, and y'all can talk the legal entities of it. And hopefully we'll make this a short night.
Hey, Charlie Perkins, do we have to swear in or anything?
Yeah, for our usual practice, yes, sir, especially Billings, Rodden, and Perkins. I mean, goodness. Dick, are you on here too?
I'm on here too.
All right, very good. Well, the two of you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Just to swear.
Yes. I do.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all right.
So go ahead, Joe. And like I said, try to make it brief. And then what I think we'll do is turn it over to the attorneys. I know we've got possibly some legal issues here that I'd like all three attorneys to kind of address, maybe hash out, and we'll take it step by step from there.
Okay. This is a request to amend the master plan, and we, as staff, we've requested this amended master plan. The Smiths would like to convert the remainder of Falls Creek area that was planned for single-family lots. They want to be able to do a combination of single-family townhomes, so duplex townhomes or attached townhomes, to duplex units, and also townhomes in 5 to 8 unit buildings. So this was originally rezoned in 2004 with the concept plan approved for traditional neighborhood development, and that included a downtown area that was zoned B4 that was both retail and a combination of office and residential mixed-use buildings. Then there was a townhome area. The remainder was single family, and then across the creek on the east side property that the Smiths owned was planned for apartments. That original concept plan was amended a year later to add more townhomes. So this amended concept plan was approved by the Planning Commission with the same previous conditions as the zone change, but a few more added conditions. Nothing substantial, just the standard conditions that we typically have on a concept plan. Then it was developed over time. The project morphed a little bit. The mixed use buildings downtown were removed, and they had approved 2 separate apartment developments, one called the Heritage, one called the Traditions, standalone apartments. There were some townhomes approved south of the main single family area where townhomes were on the original master plan. So it morphed over time. We didn't require an updated master plan with those changes because although they changed the layout and configuration of the units, they were generally in the same areas that type of use was shown on the original concept plan. So the apartments were in the multifamily area or in the mixed use area or approximate. Townhomes were in the townhome area, and single family was still shown in the single family area. So in 2013, the thing that was driving this was there was an updated floodplain study by FEMA, and updated floodplain maps were adopted by the city. They increased the floodplain significantly on Dry Run Creek in this area that's still yet to be developed, but shown as single family on the original plan. Saw a pretty large increase in floodplain, and a lot of the lots originally shown can't be built as they were planned just because of the increase in floodplain. So when the Smiths came in asking for townhomes, we told them, well, the master plan shows single family here, so you need to come and update the master plan first. And then if that's approved, you can come with a preliminary development plan or preliminary subdivision plat to actually get approval for the units. We also told them at the time that, and in the interim, the city adopted an ordinance, a change in schema development ordinance, and it required any master plan communities to stick with the same schema development throughout. So if they couldn't change midstream, once people had bought into it. And this originated, I think the ordinance originated because of problems at Canewood, where they had a lot of Canewood built out, and the HOA required membership to the golf course, and then subsequent sections were platted that didn't require a membership to the golf course. So there was a legal dispute there. City adopted this ordinance that said you can't change the HOA rules halfway through. They have to be similar or substantially similar or more strict in future phases, or you have to go through this process where you have to notify everybody in the subdivision, and you have to provide a finding that there's been a change in market conditions before you can change the schema development. So the HOA requirements. I guess it's not clear as to whether whether the Smiths in this case would have to show a finding of market, that there's been a change in the market, and would have to go through this process and get a vote from the planning commission on the change in schema development. So we, as staff, we asked them to do it just to be sure, because it is a change. It was a change in the master plan. So I think there's some discussion still to be had on that. As far as townhomes in general, I think this is a traditional neighborhood development with a mixture of housing types. So townhomes, the idea of townhomes in this development was considered and approved initially. So there was some amount of townhomes approved, as well as apartments and mixed use buildings with office and residential mixed in the same building, and single family of various lot sizes approved originally. So the idea of townhomes isn't incompatible with this type of development. So in general, staff's position is townhomes could be done and be compatible with the zoning that they got originally. We have some concerns with the plan that was shown. I know typically a master plan is more of a bubble plan. It doesn't have a tremendous amount of detail. So typically We don't get into detailed analysis of the layout. We do that at the preliminary development plan stage. But I do think because this was single family lots before, and along the creek were the largest lots, so the less dense areas were along the creek, furthest away from the commercial. We are recommending, if you do approve this amended master plan, that you put some conditions on it. So it's not as densely built out as the master plan that they're showing proposes. So we would recommend, and I have the conditions at the end of my staff report. There's really 3 new conditions. One, that the townhomes all face a public street, so they're not oriented in different directions, not facing the public street. Our opinion on a traditional neighborhood development, that it's consistent throughout as far as how the units address the street, the architectural standards of the buildings, and the emphasis on the compatible use of the public sphere. So front porches facing the street trees, creating a consistent public sphere with open space and trail network, so forth. So we're recommending that all of the townhomes, if approved, face a public street with their frontages, that they be on lots large enough that they use up only 40% of the lot. And that's our standard townhome requirements from our building area and dimension standards, and that they do no more than 52 units in this phase 2 area. So the 2005 master plan showed 52 single family lots. They lost the ability to build a lot of those lots because of the floodplain, but we're recommending that the density still be capped at 52. They can do those 52 on a smaller area outside the floodplain, but we see no justification for giving them additional density just because of the floodplain change. So I think I covered the 3 not standard recommendations. So we are recommending that townhomes would be appropriate, but that there be some limit to the density on the layout. So that's my summary of the staff report. I'll wait on the change of schema development for the attorneys to speak to, and whether you vote or not.
Thanks, Joe. I think at this point, what I'd like to do, and maybe Charlie Perkins chime in if you want, I think if we can just jump into the attorneys because they've got their thoughts and opinions. And then Charlie, hopefully you can answer Mr. Rowden and Mr. Billings' thoughts and concerns.
Hopefully.
So I don't care who wants to go first.
Mark, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. I just wanted to enter it into the record. We did get a petition from some property owners that I put in my PowerPoint. Since we didn't go through the slides, I just want to enter that into the record. There was a petition.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Off the top of your head, or did you count how many signatures we had on that? Roughly?
I think there were 23 property owners.
Okay.
We have, Matt, you want to look real quick?
Gotcha. And these are property owners, it looks like, against building the multifamily units based on.
So
Correct.
there were 3 pages. So page 1, page 2, and page 3.
All right. Thank you. All right. And again, I'm not sure if Mr. Rowden or Mr. Billings, whomever would like to go first.
Mr. Billings will speak first.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rowden. The floor is yours, Mr. Billings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, my name is Nathan Billings. I've been before you a number of times before. I think last time was about a month or so ago on a project. I want to talk about a legal issue, and I know Charlie will probably get engaged in that, and Joe probably some too. I don't know if Matt or Joe has the PowerPoint that I did quickly. And the reason I did this tonight is what the application as it's been presented to the commission tonight purports to be is for an approval by the commission of an amended master plan, and as well as a request, or it's been framed as a request to approve a change in the common scheme of development. And I was only hired in the last couple of days by the applicant, who is not an attorney. You know, they don't know how to look at some of these legal documents like I do. They're obviously good on the development side, but it's my position on behalf of the applicant that what tonight needs to be is what's called a staff review meeting under Article 8 of your ordinance to review an amended concept plan. And I know, Matt, are you there? Did you get the PowerPoint that you could start?
I'm working on that. I see the PowerPoint comes up in my email when I look on my on the iPad.
That's okay. Let me do it differently then.
Right now.
Sure. Let me do it differently then, so it doesn't delay the presentation. So the two issues tonight are whether the commission can even approve or not approve a master plan. And while it's the second issue that's presented by staff in their report, I think that the report is helpful and it's good, and so that it provides information. But when you look at the Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission subdivision regulations, what you're going to see is that they do not provide for a quote master plan anywhere. The word master plan is never referenced. Instead, the word is a concept plan. And so anytime I say concept plan or master plan, or Mr. Kane has said it, we all need to understand, in case, you know, all of us use the word master plan, we're really talking about a concept plan under the subdivision regs. And that's important because you have to deal with what the law is. And so the law is a concept plan. And a concept plan is defined in the subdivision regulations as indicating the developer's general objectives and desires in regard to the future development of his land that's presented to the Planning Commission and or staff, and here's key language, for informal consideration, which is what we're doing tonight, or two, for formal consideration required for a zone change. There is no zone change associated with the project. The zoning happened 16 years ago. And so the only consideration that can be given, and there's a legal reason for this I'll get to in a second, is it has to be an informal consideration by staff, and they've done a very good job and thorough job providing instructive and helpful comments. But I don't think the Planning Commission can approve or disapprove the concept plan tonight, or the amended concept plan tonight. And if I go on and look inside of the subdivision regs, the reason is, if you look in Article 3 of the subdivision regs, and this is for a major subdivision, in Article 3 and 4, for a major subdivision approval, and Article 3 says an optional initial step. This is section 300. Applicants may file a conceptual plan of the proposed subdivision in accordance with Article 8 to provide for consultation with the staff regarding the feasibility, status, etc. See Article 3 definitions. Article 4, likewise, for development approval says optional initial steps, section 400. Applicants may file a conceptual plan of the proposed development in accordance with Article 8. So both of those are saying that this is an optional step and that you have to look at Article 8. When you come and look at Article 8, there's an initial preamble, and then there's three other sections. Section 805 and 810 both deal with zone changes. Tonight, we don't have a zone change, so those are not applicable. Clearly, when you have a zone change in Scott County, you also have to have a concept plan with it. What the statute or what the ordinance does not say is that if you ever amend a master plan, amend a concept plan after you've got your zone change, you still have to go through a formal approval process. There is no provision at all in the subdivision regs. And so while I respect Mr. Kane's work on this, I disagree with the position he took that this is required because it's a change from a zone change. If that were the case, that exception would swallow the rule. What that means is, then how do you know at what, you should require basically an amended master plan anytime something is changed. The rules simply don't require that. Instead, if you look in section 815 of the subdivision regs, what they provide is it's a procedure for filing and review of an optional conceptual plan. And it says you can submit a conceptual plan with certain information. The conceptual street and lot layout, the conceptual drainage plan is described, the proposed building locations, parking, public facilities, landscape buffers. That's 815A is what the conceptual plan can contain. 815B then says at a staff review meeting. It's my belief that that this meeting tonight serves as that staff review meeting with public comment and with planning commission input, but it does not require a formal approval or a formal disapproval. And the reason is, if you look in 815C, it specifically says this: optional conceptual plans shall receive no formal approval. And if you go back and look at Article 3 and 4 I talked about, this is an optional plan. The only time it's not optional is when it's with the zone change. So is a sort of a preliminary matter. Staff has recommended that you all should approve with conditions. I think it's important that we start with the legal premises that I don't believe the Planning Commission respectfully has the ability to approve or to disapprove or to even approve with conditions, because there's no legal structure that allows you to do that. And the reason is this: if you were to approve this master plan, it would conceptually vest the applicant with development rights that he actually won't get until you have a approved preliminary subdivision or preliminary development plan. Second is, if you put conditions upon him, does that mean those conditions can't be changed later on? Or what's the standard for those conditions to be changed? And one of those, for example, is the 40% lot coverage ratio regarding townhomes. Instead, what I think is the proper path, and what I think is the intent and the language of the subdivision regs, is this hearing tonight should be on a staff review meeting. All of staff's comments have validity. I'm not saying I agree with all of them, but they are meaningful and they are instructive. I think members of the public can have meaningful and instructive comments. The applicant can have the same, as well as the commission. But I don't think the commission can vote to approve with conditions, or even to disapprove the amended concept plan. And I'll give you two recent examples to back this up with your own practice. One is in Harbor Village Phase 4. We were here before you all a month or so ago and got approved a preliminary subdivision plat. When we were before you 2 years ago for Phase 3, at that time, staff said, we think you need to submit an amended master plan, which we did. And in that discussion, I remember talking about, what are you looking for? And we submitted it. It was never brought to the Planning Commission for approval. It was given to you all as an example of what we submitted. In fact, we submitted it in October of 19, but you all were never asked to approve it. And the reason why is there's no law that allows you, or requires one, but two, allows you to approve it. The second one is there was a substantial change in another development called Cedar Hills, sort of north of Cincinnati Road in 2017. And again, this past summer. And again, it's the type of substantial change that if staff's position that when you change something in a development that has been a zone change has to also have a master plan, conceptually, you would have had to have that change then. It's not being argumentative, but there's a technical reason why. I think that all of the comments should be heard tonight. I think they should all be used, especially by the applicant when we come back with a formal preliminary subdivision plan. The second issue is this common scheme of development. And Joe's correct on his background of the ordinance. I actually drafted the ordinance with Andrew Hartley at the city of Georgetown. I represented Canewood at the time. And the reason that ordinance was done was because we had a developer who wanted to take sections of land that had not been submitted into the HOA and put duplexes on them. And so the ordinance was developed, and at the end of the day, the developer ended up putting single family houses like he should have there. when you look at that ordinance, it doesn't require, in fact, I don't think it allows the planning commission to vote to approve or to disapprove any change of development tonight. It's only to discuss it. The only time that the common scheme of development change can be reviewed is in conjunction with a preliminary or subdivision plan. And I can show you the exact language why if we need to. That all of that's to say this. I think for tonight, your job is actually very easy and doesn't require any action. I think all of this is to have basically a conceptual plan review and discussion to hear the merits, to give feedback. And the goal of this being, at the end of the day, staff and the commission and the applicant and the owners all want the same thing. We want an improved development that fits within what is desired for Georgetown. So with that said, as sort of the legal issue, I've got some other comments on the staff stuff. My goal tonight is to set the stage that I don't think any formal action needs to be taken or can be taken, and then to get lots of feedback. So when we come back and file our final plan, or our formal plan for a preliminary subdivision plat, we have taken those comments and incorporated them in to deliver them with our application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Before Charlie responds, do you want to let Mr. Rowden speak? And then Charlie, you can respond to both Mr. Rowden and Mr. Billings.
Mark, I don't really have anything more to add than what Nathan said, so let Charlie have it.
All right, Charlie, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can be very simple in my response. I happen to agree. I think the whole point of the concept plan at the time of a zone change is to give everyone, commission, neighbors, applicant, everybody, a snapshot of what everybody believes is going to be coming in the future, period. I don't think there's any real need to have any amendments to that, because as you come in with preliminary development plans and plats, then you deal with much more specific information, specific requirements, and specific plans. That's, if you will, a guide at the beginning. The actual plats and plans as you go through, they're the specific approvals that actually guide. They are the enforceable documents. That master plan really isn't an enforceable document. So I totally agree with the arguments and with his interpretation of our ordinance. Now, as far as the common scheme is concerned, I do think that is premature because until we see a formal plan or plat in front of us, a new preliminary, if you will, showing the modifications that are proposed, at that point, if it appears that the common scheme of development has been altered or is proposed for alteration, then in addition to the subregs that the applicant has to comply with, they have to demonstrate market need and so on, justifying a deviation from the common scheme. By and large, that common scheme isn't even on the plats, although they can reflect elements of it, because in the ordinance itself, it talks about deed restrictions, covenants, HOA restrictions. These are things that by and large aren't even on plats and development plans, but there are certain elements, lot sizes and other things that are in fact part of that scheme. Until we see the actual plan and you're asked to approve it or disapprove it, we don't have a solid anything in front of us to say, oh, there is apparently a change asked for, or no, there's not. Because the first question we have to deal with is there actually a change in the common scheme proposed? Because if there's not, then that whole issue doesn't even get addressed by us. And needless to say, any issue, any legal issue, the first question has to always be, does it even apply to this situation? It can't apply until we actually have a formal plan submitted, and then, or whether it has additional HOA restrictions that aren't consistent, whether it's got conditions on the plat or plan that do not appear consistent. At that point, the issue arises. The answer to the first question is yes, there appears to be a change. Now we have to decide, is it justified and so on under the ordinance. So yes, sir, so far I agree with Mr. Billings.
That's the first.
Okay,
Oh,
so
and by the way, Mr. Chairman, please make sure that Mr. Billings understands this will likely never happen again.
I appreciate your ability to summarize in 2 minutes what took me 15.
I knew that would happen.
thank you both. So I just want to kind of recap that. So because there's no change to the common scheme and because there's no zoning change, we really can't hear this application tonight legally.
Well,
That's
Mr.
might be a
Billings said
strong word.
you can't take action on it. I think you can.
Correct.
I think you can hear information that's helpful. I just don't think you can take an action on it.
So with us not having to take in or not needing to take any action, Mr. Perkins, and without there being a preliminary or final plan to approve, we really, I would think the commission, you attorneys, the three of you, basically solve this problem and we're not going to hear or have to vote on anything tonight.
Well, I think the way Mr. Billings has presented this is that this could become or should become what is described in the ordinance as the staff review. Well, generally, staff review does not take place at a public commission meeting. So I'm assuming, and I may be putting words in his mouth, but I'm assuming since we're all together, that staff review could in fact be tonight. I really doubt that that's what's intended because the staff review, in fact, it even describes it, is for the illumination of problem areas, maybe unique circumstances, the kinds of things that applicant needs to know about, staff needs to know about. I'm not so sure that's necessarily intended to be a public hearing. We are all here. It's not that we could not do that. We could not have a public meeting and we all learn a little bit. But I really don't think that's what chapter or Article 8 or the other even anticipate because it's called a staff review.
Let me ask you something, Charlie, and just I think to clarify, because we do have a lot of attendance on here, attendees.
Yes.
So nothing to approve tonight, but if the applicant either builds himself or sells it to a developer, either way, they're going to have to come back to be heard as a preliminary plan or, of course, before a final plan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And in fact, that's when, again, if something presents that there is in fact an apparent change in the common scheme, then that's when we say it does appear so. So we have to ask the questions. How does that justify market changes and so on? And that ordinance specifically provides for public comment. So that's not just we have a public meeting on that subject. It actually calls for public comment. So clearly we have to address all that then if in fact that's applicable.
Once we get to that point.
Once we get, yes, sir.
All right. Any questions by the commissioners, I should say? Joe Kane, do you have a response at all? I mean, are you okay with everything the three attorneys have said?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you're voting on a zone change concept plan, you would vote on any amendments to it, any major amendments to it. But I mean, I don't think our position will change, staff position will change, whether it's with the concept plan or with the preliminary plat or development plan when it comes. So whether you vote now or not probably won't make a difference as far as our staff review, but you may want to get comments from the public as long as you're here and it's a public hearing that's been advertised.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I totally agree with Joe on that last point. In fact, I kind of said that with Mr. Billings as well. That's why I think at this point, the conceptual plan or the common scheme issue, I think they're really irrelevant. Not just because I don't think they're provided for in this way in the ordinance, but the substance of the substance of a request for a modification to their preliminary development plan or plat is like Joe just said. Well, that substance isn't going to change. We're reviewing that and we have our opinions on how that ought to be. And that's going to be the same whether we talk about these other two things or not, which tells me that, well, they must not really be relevant at this point because it's not going to change the actual circumstance on the ground, which is when they actually submit and we review a formal request for a modification to preliminary plats or plans.
Comments, questions by the commission, or thoughts, I should say.
I agree that I think we should use the time to allow the public to weigh in on what they would like to see happen in their neighborhood.
Steve, do you not think that would probably happen when somebody brings a preliminary plan to us a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now?
Well, it would, but I think if you kind of get a general consensus of what people want, then you will, that might help to shape what happens going forward. Not so that there's not anything controversial when time comes.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners?
Mr. Billings, along that same line, did I understand you to say that we ought to use this time to hear from the homeowners association, so that the developers can better make a better recommendation, change their plans if they have to, that sort of thing? Did I understand you to say that?
Mr. Griffin, yeah, I don't know that I would use the word ought to. I think what Mr. Perkins is correct. The ordinance says a staff review meeting, and that's not defined anywhere to say what it is. And what the suggestion was, is because there's already notice of a public meeting and I knew people would be present, that we use time wisely to say, let's get input to make the project better. I don't feel like I should say ought to, because that's there's no law that says you ought to do that. I think it is wise and prudent to get input where you can for a better project. And if you all don't want to do that tonight, I totally respect that. And what I'm going to suggest to the applicant is that we set up a meeting with the HOA, and we do this separately outside of the commission meeting. I'm open either way. I've just done this long enough to know there are things that you should do in the process that get to a better project.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. With Mr. Mifflin's comment and Mr. Smith's comment, and there are several attendees from the general public and probably from that subdivision, I think maybe we can open it up. I'm not sure if there's one spokesperson for the group or if we can just take individual comments. And then Charlie, please remember to swear everybody in, probably individually, or if you want to do it as a group, it's up to you.
We probably should do it individually, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there anybody, again, I'm seeing about 15 attendees. Is there anybody in particular that's the spokesperson for the group? If not, I see a Steve Bruckwicki raising his hand. So Matt,
Mark, before we get into those comments, let me ask Joe one more question. So
Sure.
The proposal that we had, that this, it was listed as amended master plan, the staff doesn't have a problem with putting in townhouses into this area that you just object to the layout of them. The concept of the townhouses is perfectly okay.
I think we're okay with townhomes on the southern part of it, with single family behind existing single family as it was shown. Yes, but the layout is the main issue, the layout and the density.
Okay, thank you.
And Joe, though, this is truly just a concept plan, correct? So, I mean, much can change between now and the ultimate preliminary or final plan. I mean, this is truly just a concept, correct? Even though
Correct.
the master plan?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so to answer Mr. Mifflin's thoughts, because I think I'm thinking along with them, I agree. I mean, they're jammed in there pretty tight. But as they come back to us, again, 6 months, a year from now, whatever the time frame is, we can definitely ask for fewer, because I do agree. I think the density is fairly, thick. So we can definitely, at a later date, I think, keep them in line, and maybe I don't know. My thought was maybe 10% less, which would maybe be 5 less units. I don't know what the magic number is, but at this point, I mean, we can talk about it, but we're not voting on it unless we want it. I don't think we need to vote on anything tonight. because they still have to come back to us with a preliminary plan. And this is really just a concept. So keep that in mind, Mr. Mifflin. All right. I think we were gonna, oh, Matt took the participants. Mr. Brookwicki?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
He sure can. The floor is yours.
Excuse me, Mr. Brookwicki, if you could raise your right hand, please.
Yep.
You swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief.
I do.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I just want to state for the record, this is not a personal attack against Mr. Smith, his lawyers, or anybody related to the developer. This is us and the 23 signatures on the petition you got trying to preserve our equity in our single family homes based on the concept that we all bought into, which is from the main entrance at Royal Springs down to the first stop sign, including the area where he's trying to put in what I am calling hexaplexes, septiplexes, and octoplexes, 5, 6, 7, 8 unit multiplexes, is all supposed to be single family homes based on a master plan I have dated from 2015 that shows all those as single family lots. Second of all, he is trying to argue a change in market condition. And that is my main point that I want to refute today. And unfortunately, the lawyer is going to get all my spiel now to refute me when you go to a master plan review now. But he's claiming a change in market, that he cannot sell single family units, and due to a floodplain issue that he's lost the capability to build single family units. I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, a change in market condition is not a floodplain issue. That is a business loss he needs to take on his taxes. Second of all, 2 years ago or so, there was a petition made by the same claimant to change numerous units, which you've already referenced to, over in Falls Creek Drive. That's the middle courtyard loop. He argued at the time that nobody wanted to live in single family rear access garages off an alleyway. 2 years ago, you all disapproved that request by him. Since then, there have been 5, 6 homes built in that exact area with rear entry garages off an alleyway, and they are all occupied. Additionally, there have been 2 other homes built and occupied at 138 Falls Creek Drive and 132 Falls Creek Drive. There is an additional home at 130 Falls Creek Drive under construction. There is also a home built over in the Village Park Drive, which is the interior loop, that was, I believe Joey built that one for a retired Michigan State Trooper. There's another one at 160 that is under contract with Casey Builders. So what I'm saying is there is not a change in market conditions. Joey sold 10 of these lots to a combination of either New Haven, Casey, or Haddock's Construction, and they have all built single family homes and have occupied 8 of the 10 lots at this time, with 2 lots under construction and a possible 3rd at the main entrance by Ann Mason. So I don't believe there is what he's arguing, a change in market condition that he cannot build and sell single family homes. Our other issue is with the duplexes that are already in place, the 2 sixplexes that got built down between the 2 stop signs, that there is serious congestion and traffic issues due to the size of the units and everybody parking on the streets. There's a safety issue for the women and children and fathers trying to get in and out of their cars with the additional traffic of all the high school students now cutting through at the BP gas station to bypass the light at the intersection. I've got numerous emails from a resident down there in one of the duplexes that says the United States Postal Services have a problem delivering their mail because they cannot get to the mailboxes. Additionally, we have been told by Mr. Smith that these new multiplexes that he plans on building will not be rentals, that they will be purchase units. Well, the 2 sixplexes that were built down there, I know one of them is under a contract with a company out of Lexington, and they're all leases. Additionally, he said these new multiplexes he plans to build will be anywhere between $300,000 to $500,000 units, which I'll believe that when I see it. But you also got to remember, even though technically these units are not in the 100-year floodplain, some of these units are dang close to the 500-year floodplain. And I had to prove through a surveyor that my house at 136 Falls Creek Drive is not in the 500-year floodplain to avoid paying flood insurance. So I need to want to make sure everybody looking at buying any of these duplexes or even the single family homes he plans on building behind us are aware that they are potentially in a 500-year floodplain. Our fear in the 23 applicants that signed that petition is people are going to build these units and all of a sudden they're going to realize they're in a floodplain and they're not going to purchase them or rent them, and they're going to sit there vacant, which directly affects our initial value in the homes we bought. And let's see, I believe you do have my petition. It was already acknowledged and shown on screen that you did to get the petition with 36 signatures representing 23 single family homes. So that's basically my argument, that there is not a change in market scheme, that homes are being built, homes are being occupied, duplexes are being occupied. They're just not being built and occupied by Joey Smith and company building them. There are lots that he sold to other builders / developers to accomplish the mission. Again, this is not a personal attack against Mr. Smith or his lawyers or anybody dealing with his development. This is us trying to protect our investment in our family homes and versus his business requirements. Pending any of your questions from you, the lawyers, or Mr. Smith, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brickwicki. Anybody else from the subdivision or community want to speak? I think we've got Thoroughbred Engineering on here. Anybody else want to speak? Click on to raise your hand, and then Matt Summers will unmute you. I do like Mr. Billings' idea of meeting with the HOA and the group and the community, the subdivision, to kind of hash out some details either prior to building. Oh, there's a couple hands, so we'll get to them. That may be, besides hearing the subdivision tonight, also having a follow-up meeting with Mr. Billings or Mr. Rodden and or the Mr. Smiths or a developer if they choose that route. So it looked like the next person to speak is Tommy
Sagasser.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like for Brew to go over.
Yeah, Mr. Sagasser, would you raise your right hand for Mr. Perkins so he could swear you in?
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I like to have more information, and I think more information needs to be out to the public and everyone. So if you do build a house down there and it's in the 500-year floodplain, your loans, financial institutions that loan to that will require flood insurance. Now, from the information that I have, this could be real expensive. If you have a $400,000 house, it wouldn't surprise me if it wouldn't cost $800 to $1,000 a month for just to cover the flood insurance in order to get your loan. So Brew may know more about that. Now, I wish he had placed that in his conversation. So if Brew wants to comment on that, because he has more experience what it was going to cost him in a 500-year plane, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Rowe. Matt, would you unmute Mrs. Courtney Rowe? Mrs. Rowe?
Sorry, we have a couple of little ones in the background.
No problem. Unfortunately, that's what we get with Zoom meetings. So Mr. Perkins is going to swear you in, so please raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to give to be the best or the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Go ahead, Mrs. Rowe.
There was a comment made by the lawyer that it would be nice to get together as an HOA. The people of the neighborhood actually do not have any control over that HOA. So there isn't an HOA committee because Mr. Smith still owns a significant part of the neighborhood. And so we're not necessarily being consulted in any format, but in some other things, like Mr. Tommy said, I'm a past resident of the state of Mississippi, and since Mississippi has just a small coastline, it's considered a coastal state, which means you have to include flood insurance. And so on a small home, it raised our insurance probably 25%, which is going to be much more significant for a larger home. And then just on some of the other things of the neighborhood, we love our current apartment owners and tenants, but we have also had to call the police on them multiple times for riding ATVs in the neighborhood or riding motorcycles in the middle of the night. We've also had to call code enforcement on Mr. Smith several times for lots that haven't been mowed or taken care of. And with more duplexes or multifamily homes, that means a lot more common space that can be left unattended. And if you would like proof of the lots that have not been attended to, I can personally send you that email with pictures because it's the lot next door to me. And then also just dealing with some of the safety issues. On my street alone, there are 4 kids under the age of 3. And so the traffic is a really big deal because we have so much that comes through because of the apartments. And then also just, these are not starter homes. These are established homes or forever homes. And so the idea of bringing in duplexes and multiplexes and apartment complexes, which are known to lower the like equity in a home. I feel like this is not the neighborhood to do that in. And it's not necessarily us wanting to get away from duplexes or to agree to something less. The people of the neighborhood, and I think I speak for all of us, we don't want them at all. So for that to be kind of put into the committee's mindset of what we are planning.
Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. Anybody else want to speak? Oh, hold on. I think I see a hand here. Oh, no. Anybody else?
I had a question for Charlie and for Mr. Billings. In a development like this where things are underway and then the floodplain maps are changed, how is that handled as far as is the density? Can the density remain? Does it need to remain the same per acre, or are we obligated to allow them to increase density in order to have the same number of units on this piece of property?
Who is going first, Mr. Chairman?
I think he was asking that to you, Charlie, wasn't he?
Well, you have to be first that time. No, sir, Mr. Smith, we're not obligated to do anything other than to properly interpret and enforce our ordinance. So in the event, as in this case, they have lost some acreage and some resulting loss of dwelling units, it's our responsibility to review any proposed changes. Those changes have to be within our ordinance. And if they can show that our ordinance would allow X, whatever that might be, then I think we have an obligation to approve that. We don't have an obligation to simply give them more units just to make up the difference. It needs to be in compliance with our ordinance. So if there are reasons, appropriate reasons why certain things should not be approved, then no, sir, we don't approve them just because floodplain maps have cost them some units. If otherwise it can be done and it satisfies all of our requirements, then I think we really don't have a whole lot to say about it. Now, if I might just add one more note to that, Joe's point is that not necessarily number of units, but density, orientation, basically the functionality of it. Well, I think we've got a big obligation there. So even if our ordinance would give them, say, 72 more units, more than enough to replace the ones lost, it still has to be a good plan. It's got to satisfy our ordinance. It's got to be workable. We certainly have no business, no right at all, no authority to harm, or do anything that our ordinance would not otherwise permit. So just to give one terribly extreme example, if they lost, say, 50 units, but under our regulations, there was no place to make up 50 units, then they don't get any of those replaced. If our regs can be satisfied, good development done, and make up all 50 of them, then absolutely we can do that.
Where should Doug and Joey, where would that money be recouped? Is it the comment made earlier that they should write it off as a business loss? Or?
Well, I don't do taxes, so I'm not going to talk about that one. But we can't approve something that doesn't satisfy our ordinance, period. We can't do anything that doesn't satisfy state law. We are a creature of the legislature, and as such, we've got to follow our rules. So where we can assist and approve something that follows the rules, I mean, of course we should do that. We should do that for anyone. We can't do it if it's opposed to the rules, regardless of Doug's loss or anybody else's. I mean, that's just, I can't imagine being in that business. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm sure there's a whole lot of risk to it. And this is some of those things that happen. But where we can do something consistent with the regs and without harm, well, of course we do that. That's what we would do for anybody.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anybody else have a comment or?
Just comment.
Yeah,
yes,
this is.
or Mr. or Mrs. Brookwicki? Is that who I just heard?
Yeah, it's Steve Brewicki again. I concur with what was said earlier, and I believe the 23 people on the signatory would agree that we would like to have a meeting with the Georgetown-Scott County planners, the homeowners leadership, residents of both single family, multifamily, the apartments, and with the lawyers and engineering firm developing Mr. Smith and Company. We all need to have one big meeting to discuss this in a more semi-formal arrangement where we can all address this and talk to each other back and forth and come to a common agreement of how to solve this problem to make everybody happy. I also appreciate y'all taking your time listening to us and for your due diligence in this matter. Thank you.
Yeah, usually when there's a meeting, it would be, Mr. Brookwicki, it'd be between you and the attorneys and developer and things like that. The planning and zoning commissioner would be there. You'd have to come to like this meeting. So what we usually ask or recommend is having a meeting prior to coming to us and then hopefully work out all the details. But generally speaking, the Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't come to or be part of, because we've got to be careful with quorums, correct, Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
That's fine. I understand that. That's not a problem. Now that you clarified, then I'm good with that. We can work with Joey Smith and the rest of them to make the rest of it work then. I appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to speak? Commissioners, residents? We've got a Paula Kinzer probably.
Yeah. You hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I had a question on
Mr. Kinzer, if you don't mind, raise your right hand and Mr. Perkins swear you in.
Even for questions, sir, we always swear in. Do you
Sure, no problem.
The statements or questions you're about to make are the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
It was mentioned in two of the previous statements that there's a 500-year floodplain and I believe a 100-year floodplain. And I wanted to know on the map that is on the screen right now, which one is shown for my first question. The hashtag line between the side number 2 and number 1 there on the right part of the property.
And that would probably be a question for either Ben Krebs or the engineer. And I think the engineer is on here, if I'm not mistaken. Thoroughbred. Matt, would you unmute them? Oh, there you go. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah,
I think
should be able to speak.
I'll go ahead and jump in on that one.
Thanks, Ben.
I am pretty sure what they're showing is the 100-year floodplain. The FEMA does not. That is known as the regulatory floodplain. They do not have rules for this type of development for the 500-year floodplain. Scott County, Georgetown-Scott County has a flood damage prevention ordinance that would address all that. Any new residential home would require to be out of the floodplain or to be elevated at least 2 feet above the floodplain by some measure.
Okay. Well, the reason
Thank you, Mr. Krebs.
we moved here in 2015, and there have been 2 floods. The water literally has come up right up to that line both times. And if you walk out there into the field, where that line is, it drops down about another 3 feet on average, between 2 and 3 feet. And my question is, if they were to lower that, that's going to widen the amount of area that water could come in. But to your point, they would probably have to bring in, thousands of yards of dirt to bring that above flood stage, because that whole section is flooded twice. That whole area was under 3 feet of water, moving at about 10 miles per hour twice since 2015. So my second question was, is that dictated by FEMA, or what does Georgetown, you guys have to say about who can build or not build in that area? Who dictates that ultimately?
Mr. Krebs, do you want to speak to that?
Find that unmute button. This is a FEMA adopted floodplain, so FEMA has the final say on there. They would have to survey. I would love to know dates or see evidence of when it was up there. Sometimes you can challenge the reference floodplain if it's obviously wrong, or if there's good evidence that
Photos and videos. I'm sure most of the neighborhood probably does, but it's been there twice since we've been here, in 5 years.
Now, Mr. Kinzer, are you referring to the area number 4?
It's 4 down to pretty much number 1. It starts to taper off to the right after number 1, but those properties that are marked down through there would definitely be under at least 2 feet of water on the worst one. The second one wasn't quite as bad, but there was still probably a foot of water down through almost that whole area. And again, we have video and photos of all that, as I said, most of the neighborhood probably does.
And I think based on this being that flood map, number 4, Joe Kane, correct me if I'm wrong, number 4 is unbuildable, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
4 is
So,
open
yeah,
space.
so all that area in number 4 where it's all greened out, that cannot be built. So that's a good thing.
Mr.
Build a home
Mr.
where it
Chairman, can I
floods.
comment briefly on the floodplain issue?
Yes, Mr. Billings, go ahead and speak.
There's been a couple of comments about that tonight, and again, we don't need to resolve it tonight, but just for some information and context for the committee. The FEMA is charged to regularly update the floodplain maps based upon certain parameters, and there's different terms that are used: floodway, floodplain, and watershed. And Ben Krebs has told you all correctly that this is the 100-year floodplain boundary that is required to be set for residential development. What I have see not uncommonly in development cases, and I've represented homeowners who've raised this, is when you have undeveloped land, which this section is, and you have flooding in that undeveloped land, the homeowner believes, or homeowners believe, that flooding is going to occur on where the road is or where lots are going to be. But they're oftentimes inadvertently mistaken because the road and those lots haven't actually been platted, and they're just looking out over that undeveloped land and say, oh, it's flooding, you can't put anything there. Which is the whole reason why we have to follow very, very strict guidelines that Ben oversees and that FEMA has put into place before we can plat anything. And God love people like Brent Combs, who are engineers who have significant insurance that if they don't want to mess that up for that exact reason. So it's I think it's one of my bullet points to look at the time we would come with a preliminary subdivision plan. But I often just see misunderstanding about what's actually been flooded versus where actual boundaries are, because the two don't always collate. But I'm going to get more information so we can discuss it when we actually file an application.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Anybody else like to speak? I think Thoroughbred had his or her hand up, but I think they've rescinded. Mr. Bruckwicki again, it looks like.
And I agree with the lawyer in his part that the area in green on the map on the screen is the 100-year floodplain. What it's not showing is the 500-year floodplain, which comes all through what's area 1 of those single-family homes, which is not a building issue for the developer. It is a mortgage flood insurance issue for the homeowner, which is what I'm afraid they're going to build all these homes, single family duplexes, whatever. And all of a sudden the proposed buyers are going to realize they got to pay $1,800 or whatever a year in additional flood insurance because the bank says they're in a 500-year floodplain.
Thank you, Mr. Brickwicki. Any other comments, thoughts? I think Thoroughbred Engineering has their hand up. Matt, would you?
Is that Brent?
Yeah, that's Brent.
Hang on, Mr. Perkins is going to swear you in there.
All right.
Do you swear a firm statement you're about to give to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the flood insurance. Unless they've changed that in the last year, flood insurance only applies to the regulatory FEMA floodplain, which is the 100-year floodplain. So I'm not sure what the insurance agent was doing, talking about the 500-year, but I don't think that's correct. I think it's only the 100-year.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate you.
It technically is a matter of law. Flood insurance is required when you're in a special flood hazard area. And that special flood hazard area depends upon what type of development and area you're doing it. Typically it's 100-year, but there's actually some other areas that can affect that. But the question is, are you in the special flood hazard area? It's not, which is not the 500-year plan.
Thank you all. So it looks like we're just kind of wrapping up here. So I do want to thank all the community in the neighborhood for coming out tonight. I know everybody's time's valuable. Any commissioners have any questions?
I just wanted to, from what I gathered from the people that have been speaking tonight or from the residents, I guess they would like to see everything that's buildable through there be single family homes. Is that correct? They don't want any change as far as no duplexes, nothing else other than single family homes.
Correct, but Mr. Perkins, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's already zoned for multi-use, correct?
It is.
I believe so, Your Honor.
If somebody were to come and develop this property as a multifamily home property and it meets all the requirements, I mean, you know, and like we've done before, Steve, I mean, we get a lot of people, they don't, you know, you've heard the term and I've used it a lot, NIMBY, not in my backyard. No one wants it in their backyard, but if it's zoned that way and an applicant meets all our requirements, we don't have a choice to approve a multi-unit. I mean, you can have petitions, you can, you know, come stand outside in hundreds, but if it meets all our requirements, and I know Mr. Perkins has pointed that out many times over the 6 years I've been on here, you know, we almost, again, we've got a plan, you know, if we got plans, we've got a master plan, if it meets all its requirements, we're here to help and make sure all the rules and laws are followed properly.
Yes, sir.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Perkins.
Yes, sir. I agree with you.
If I may add something though,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
property is actually zoned single family residential.
R1C.
It was only allowed to have the multifamily and the townhome units as part of the planned unit development zone change that they received back in 2004, which is part of the reason why staff was pushing for the Planning Commission to review this current master plan, was because the uses that they're proposing with the master plan are not uses that staff could approve in this zoning district. They're actually not allowed in this zoning district.
But as part of a planned unit development, there's flexibility, and that's been anticipated since the beginning. Now, this may exceed what anybody had in mind, and we'll get into that when the plan's proposed. But that's what PUDs do. They have different densities, they have different uses. That's why they're a planned unit and not just a single zone.
Yeah, but I just wanted to mostly clarify, this is not actually zoned R2 or R3 where multifamily units are permitted by right.
That's true.
Thank you both for pointing that out, Matt and Mr. Perkins. I do think we've got, it looks like Christine Hoskins, Miss Hoskins would like to speak.
I would just, as a homeowner in Falls Creek.
Excuse me, raise your right hand.
Yep. Let Mr. Perkins swear you in.
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, ma'am.
I've lived in Creek since 2007, so I may be one of the last, the originals out here. I'm also a realtor in the area. And, I personally, we bought into, I apologize for the dog. I bought into the fact that there was going to be a combination of the single family homes and the multifamily. So I do not have an issue with that. I do, want it to be done in a way with regards to the density and the placement so that it does not take away the value of the community, as it was originally designed to be. And I think that's really the point to make, at least on my side. And, the other point that I had with regards to that was with the market changes. If you look at what the builders that have sold property here, I have no doubt in my mind that the single family homes will continue to sell at great rate. Their average days on market, as they're being built, they are selling. So the demand is there. And that would be a very difficult thing in Scott County to argue, in my opinion.
Thank you, Miss Casada.
Welcome.
Any other comments, questions, commission, community, attorneys, engineers, anybody? If not, based on what I understand from Mr. Perkins, Mr. Billings, there is no need for a motion or vote, anything at this time. What I would just say is please work the community. I'd open this because I know a lot of you don't attend a lot of these meetings fairly regularly. Please reach out to Mr. Billings, Mr. Rowden, work with Doug and Joey Smith, and hopefully everybody can come to terms before there is a preliminary plan brought to us. And again, that could be months, it could be years, who knows? But I think a lot of the details can be worked out prior to our next meeting on this particular plan, preliminary or final, and of course, final eventually. With that being said, I think we're okay. We're done with this one. Excuse me.
If I ask one question to Mr. Kane, I got an email earlier with the petition on it. Was that from Mr. Bruckwicki? That way I have a contact person I can reach out to and sort of start some communication with that group. Is that the right email?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
Matt, if you want to unmute Mr. Bruckwicki again, it looks like he's got a question or maybe just a statement. Oh, maybe not. I thought he had his hand up.
He should be.
There you go.
Am I
Mr.
there?
Bruckwicki. Yep, you're here.
Yes, I'm the one that emailed the petition to Mr. Kane, who provided it all to you. So if Mr. Billings would like my contact information, I can provide it to him now, or however he wants to get it from Mr. Kane, or however we can take care of that.
I'll email him. There's no need to delay a meeting for that. That's easy to get done.
That's fine. All right. Thank you. If not, let's move along because we spent a little time on this. Thank you all again. We appreciate you being on this Zoom call and moving on then, I guess, to other business. Small cell tower ordinance that was postponed or continued. Approval of the 2021 application deadlines. I did not see that in my oh, there we are. Never mind. I take that back. Should all have it. There's the deadlines. It's the last page of your packet. So please take note. mark your calendar. Because it's got the workshop and our meeting dates for 2021 on there. So I know for the newer members, please make sure you put it in your calendar. When I first joined, I guess it's been 6 years. I can't believe it. I missed a meeting or two because of the way the Mondays and Thursdays fall. So it's not always the second Monday or first Monday and first Thursday. Sometimes it's the second. So keep that in mind.
Mr. Chairman,
So a motion and second to
I
approve.
think we need a motion and second on that, don't we?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for both of you for pointing that out. So I need a motion to approve the 2021 application deadlines and dates and times.
I make a motion.
So I got a motion by Mrs. Mizell
Second.
and a second by, I think it was Mr. Vest, if I'm not mistaken. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Update on previous approval projects. That's in the packet if y'all want it, right? That is in here too. You know what? It wasn't in here, Joe. Was
I
not in there.
typically, I do those bi-monthly. It was in there last time.
Okay,
I'll put one in the next time. If I
Thank
can
you,
answer
Mr.
any
Chris.
questions.
yeah. Anybody have any questions about those? All right, well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn if y'all are ready to quit.
So move.
So I've got a
Second.
motion by Mr. Mifflin
Second.
and a second by Mrs. Singer. All in favor, say aye.
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 Before we dump this meeting, I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas